At 1014 hours local time, a solitary American P-8 Poseidon was cruising at 18000 feet above the Strait of Hormuz, running a standard surveillance loop. To the naked eye, it looked like a defenseless Boeing 737 passenger jet that had gotten lost. 5 Iranian Shahed 136 drones launched from a hidden site on Qashem Island, their lawnmower engines screaming as they climbed to intercept. The Iranian operators on the ground were practically celebrating. They saw a slow, fat target and 5 suicide drones carrying 50-kilogram warheads. The math seemed simple: 5 attackers against 1 unarmed plane equals a ball of fire. They thought they were about to obliterate a symbol of American air power. But the Iranians were playing checkers, while the PA crew was playing 4D chess. What the drone operators didn't realize was that they weren't launching an ambush. They were voluntarily feeding their most advanced hardware directly into the mouth of the most sophisticated electronic woodchipper in the US Navy. The P-8 Poseidon wasn't in that airspace by accident. It was flying a perfectly legal track 13 nautical miles off the Iranian coast, exactly 1 mile outside their territorial waters. This is the game of international chicken that superpowers play every day. The aircraft's mission was intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance ISR. Think of it as a flying vacuum cleaner that sucks up radar frequencies, radio chatter, and thermal images, cataloging everything for the Office of Naval Intelligence. To the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps IRGC commander, watching on his radar screen this persistent orbiting was an insult. He saw a $290 million surveillance platform loitering on his doorstep, peering into his bases with impunity. He decided that today he wouldn't just send a radio warning, he would send a kinetic message. The weapon of choice was the Shahed 136. It is the Kalashnikov of the drone world, cheap, rugged, and produced in the thousands. It uses a noisy 50-horsepower engine that sounds like an angry lawnmower and flies at a sluggish 115 miles per hour. It has no camera, no sensors, and no brain to speak of. It simply flies to a GPS coordinate and detonates. The Iranian strategy was based on simple, brutal math. A P-8 is a large, non-stealthy airliner that cannot turn fast and carries no defensive cannons. If you launch enough cheap drones at it, statistically, one should get through. The commander ordered the launch of a 5-drone swarm, spaced to converge on the American plane from different angles. He wasn't trying to scare them, he was trying to intercept them. He was betting that the American reliance on high-tech rules and regulations would make them slow to react to a low-tech suicidal charge. It was a bold bet. It was also a catastrophic miscalculation of what modern electronic warfare actually looks like. The 5 Shaheds climbed slowly through the humid air, their primitive flight computers struggling to maintain formation. To a standard airport radar, these composite-bodied drones would look like large seagulls or weather clutter. They were designed to be invisible to 1990s technology. But the P-8 Poseidon isn't living in the 1990s. Its fuselage is studded with the ALQ-240 Electronic Support Measures Suite, a system that doesn't just see objects, it tastes the electromagnetic spectrum. Even though the Shaheds were flying on silent GPS guidance, their unshielded commercial-grade wiring and spark plugs were leaking radio frequency noise like a dripping faucet in a library. The P-8 sensors picked up the electromagnetic hum of their ignition systems from 30 miles out. Inside the tactical cabin, the electronic warfare operator didn't scream or slam a red button. He simply flagged 5 new tracks on his display, with the detachment of an accountant finding a math error in a spreadsheet. Contacts designated zombie 1 through 5, he murmured over the comms. The crew watched the geometry unfold on their screens. Here is where the physics became laughable. The P-8 cruises at 490 miles per hour. The Shaheds struggled to hit 115. It was like a pack of angry chihuahuas trying to chase down a mail truck on a highway. The only way the drones could score a hit was if the P-8 flew directly into them, and the Iranian commander was counting on exactly that. He had analyzed the P-8's patrol loop for weeks, predicting its turn point and placing his drones as a floating minefield in the sky. He thought he had set a clever trap. He didn't realize he had just lined up 5 targets for a calibration test. The pilot didn't change course. He didn't increase speed. He just let the gap close, inviting the drones into the kill zone. At 3 miles out, the Shaheds committed to their terminal vectors. This was the moment of maximum danger. The drones separated, attempting to box the P-8 inches, a multi-directional pincer movement. The Iranian operators watching the telemetry on their ground station likely held their breath. They were seeing the radar blips merge. In their minds, they were seconds away from seeing the American plane erupt in smoke. But inside the P-8, the tactical coordinator looked at the swarm not with fear, but with pity. He authorized the engagement. There was no Fox 1 call. No missiles dropped from the wings, no guns rattled the airframe. The electronic warfare officer simply rotated a dial and pressed a soft key on his touchscreen, activating the high-gain directional jamming array housed in the aircraft's tail cone. Here is the thing about Shahed drones: they are incredibly stupid machines. They navigate using commercial GPS signals, the same weak radio waves that help your phone find a coffee shop. These signals travel 20,000 kilometers from space and arrive at Earth with the power of a whisper. The P-8's jamming pod, on the other hand, is a heavy metal vocalist screaming into a megaphone from 10 feet away. The jammer didn't just block the GPS signal, it drowned it in a tsunami of high-power white noise concentrated specifically on the L1 frequency band. To the drone's guidance computers, the world instantly disappeared. 1 second they knew exactly where they were, the next they were floating in a void of static. This is what the military calls a soft kill. It doesn't look like a Michael Bay movie explosion, it looks like a robot having a stroke. The lead drone, suddenly blinded, defaulted to its fail-safe mode, maintained straight and level flight until signal reacquisition. But there was no signal to reacquire. The P-8 was pumping out so much interference that it was effectively burning out the delicate receiver antennae on the drones without ever touching them. The Iranian obliteration force had just been turned into 5 blind hunks of fiberglass wandering aimlessly through the sky. The disintegration of the attack was almost comical in its lack of drama. Without GPS updates, the Shaheds were forced to rely on their backup inertial navigation systems to stay airborne. On a $1 million Tomahawk cruise missile, the inertial system is a laser ring gyroscope that can fly for hours with near-perfect precision. On a $20,000 Shahed, the inertial system consists of cheap MEMS sensors, similar to the ones in your smartphone, that get confused when you rotate the screen too fast. Without the correcting hand of GPS, the drones began to drift. Not a little bit, but wildly. Drone 2 developed a phantom bank angle, slowly turning itself upside down, while its confused computer insisted it was perfectly level. It spiraled into the Persian Gulf with a splash that barely made a whitecap. Drones 3 and 4 crossed paths, their blind autopilots nearly colliding, before they wandered off on random headings, essentially becoming unguided lawnmowers in the sky until they ran out of fuel. The lead drone, the one that had been closest to the kill, pitched up violently in response to a sensor glitch, stalled at 2,000 feet, and fell backward toward the ocean like a dead leaf. There were no explosions in the sky, no Hollywood fireball, just gravity claiming 5 poorly made machines that had lost their electronic minds. The P-8 crew watched the carnage on their infrared cameras, recording the heat signature of each splash with the indifference of someone watching a screensaver. They didn't even have to spill their coffee. The P-8 Poseidon didn't even abort its mission. It didn't bank away. It didn't call for fighter support. It simply finished its assigned patrol loop, logging another 4 hours of flight time, while 5 units of the Islamic Republic's finest loitering munitions sank to the bottom of the strait. The entire engagement had cost the American taxpayers roughly $20 in electricity to power the jamming pods. It cost Iran 5 airframes, $100,000 in hardware, and an immeasurable amount of professional dignity. But in the world of geopolitical theater, truth is often the first casualty. Back in Tehran, the spin machine went into overdrive. By that evening, Iranian state media released a breathless video package titled "Guardians of the Sky Expel American Intruder." The footage showed the drones launching complete with dramatic music and quick cuts. It showed the P-8 inches the distance through a grainy zoom lens. And then conveniently the video faded to black right before the obliteration part was supposed to happen. They claimed the American plane fled in terror. It was a masterpiece of creative editing, designed to convince a domestic audience that they had slapped the superpower in the face. Unfortunately for the regime's video editors, the US Navy plays by different rules. 2 days later, the Pentagon declassified the feed from the P-8's MX-20 electro-optical turret. The video was silent, high definition, and brutally embarrassing. It showed the drones approaching, then suddenly wobbling like drunkards and finally tumbling into the water, one by one. There was no fleeing. The telemetry data overlaid on the video showed the P-8 holding a rock-steady heading and altitude throughout the entire event. It was the digital equivalent of a receipt. Iran had tried to sell a story of strength, but the Americans had the dashcam footage of the crash. The footage didn't just debunk the Iranian narrative, it humiliated their engineering. It showed the world that their fearsome swarm could be defeated not by missiles or lasers, but by a software update and a directional antenna. The message was clear: you can lie to your people, but you cannot lie to a sensor suite that records in terabytes per second. This encounter exposes a fatal flaw in the modern fetish for cheap drone warfare. We have been told for years that the future of war is quantity over quality, that swarms of $500 drones will inevitably overwhelm billion-dollar platforms simply by the weight of numbers. It is a terrifying theory, but as this incident proved, it falls apart when it hits the invisible wall of high-end electronic warfare. The Shahed 136 is effective against a power plant or a trench line because concrete and dirt cannot jam a frequency. But throwing them against a P-8 Poseidon is like throwing rocks at a tank. You might scratch the paint, but you aren't stopping the machine. The P-8 represents a level of spectral dominance where the battlefield isn't physical, it's digital. To the American aircraft, those drones weren't physical threats. They were just unsecured Wi-Fi networks waiting to be disconnected. This sent a chilling message to observers in Moscow and Beijing who were betting heavily on swarm tactics. It demonstrated that in a high-intensity conflict, the airspace around a US Navy task force will likely be a dead zone for cheap electronics. If your weapon relies on GPS civilian chips or unshielded comms, it won't even get close enough to detonate. It will simply fall out of the sky disabled by a beam of invisible energy that costs less than a cup of coffee to generate. The Iranians thought they were overwhelming the system. In reality, they were just feeding data into an algorithm that eats drones for breakfast. So, did Iranian drones obliterate an American plane? If by obliterate you mean provided a live-fire calibration test for American jamming equipment while destroying themselves in a humiliating display of incompetence, then yes, mission accomplished. The Strait is quiet again. The P-8 is still flying its loop, its sensors sweeping the horizon for the next attempt. This story serves as a reminder that in the 21st century, the loudest weapon isn't always the deadliest. Iran wanted a fireworks show to put on the evening news. Instead, they got a 404 error and a splash. If you want to know what actually happens when hype meets hardware, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We don't just read the headlines, we check the flight logs. See you in the next one.